YouTube and NPR are doing a lot of talking about a huge cultural shift that is going on right now in our country. I'm not talking about political. I am talking about what is happening to religion, mainly Christianity, but all of them, here in America. The United States used to be one of the most highly religious countries on the planet. We had an enormous amount of energy and thought and care in our congregations. But now that's changing. As they say, we are in the middle of a perfect storm, a tsunami of church closings. Historically, church membership was over 70% in our country, and on a Sunday morning, 50% of the population went to church. In the South, it was more like 75%, but no more. Some estimations range from as many as 10,000 churches that closed in 2024, and in 2025 that number went up to 15,000, and it isn't slowing down. Now you might be asking, so what? A lot of UUs do not necessarily see church closings as a bad thing as long as it's not ours. Many of the folks here have had less than stellar experiences in certain religious institutions. Me too. But I remember what happened when my mother had her church closed down. It was devastating, a life tragedy for her. Her whole life was gone. Everything she'd worked for, so much of her time and effort, caring, and her money. It was that way for a lot of people. Their community has disappeared. The center of their world is gone. But there are also societal ramifications with church closings. Many religious congregations did massive amounts of community outreach. They provided soup kitchens, clothing drives, daycare centers, food banks, check-ins for senior citizens, youth groups to help keep kids off drugs. The list goes on. And in smaller communities, priests, rabbis, and ministers were often the only source of mental health. When the church is closed right now, in our current political climate, many needs are not being met. People are suffering because the government is not prepared, nor do they want to, fill in the gap. Among other things, homelessness spikes because there's no one there to help folks on the edge. Who will feed the poorest when churches close? Especially in today's political climate that blames the poor for being poor. Religious communities were our safety net. So why is it happening? Well, the sex scandals did a lot of damage. And then there was COVID. Some churches just closed down. Others went online, but poorer churches couldn't do that. So they just died. And when it became safe to gather again, many people had gotten out of the habit. In places that didn't close down, where folks were told that God would protect them, yeah, people died, but a lot more people saw what was happening, and they lost trust in their congregation. With the coming of the megachurch, the close pastoral relationships with the minister evaporated. And it became common in larger congregations that the minister was among the wealthiest in the congregation, and they expected everyone to tithe. That was just the norm. But the internet came along, and with the internet came information, and people saw how these mega ministers were living. They had everything, sometimes even private jets. But the people who were tithing were losing their homes. So, when they saw how the ministers were living, they became unhappy. The internet did damage in other ways as well. Previously, when folks had uncomfortable theological questions, they were told they simply had a lack of faith. It was their fault, and they needed to pray about it. But with the internet, people were discovering humanism, agnosticism, even atheism. And sometimes it made a lot of sense. Not everyone who left over theological questions were unbelievers. They were just uncomfortable with the message of hatred towards folks who believed or lived differently. It didn't seem to jibe with the teachings of Jesus. And some folks became very uncomfortable with increasing rhetoric of telling them who to vote for. And finally, there has been a major, major shift in our country, especially with young people, about attitudes towards LGBTQ folk. The pulpit cried out against them, but actual people were finding out they were our friends, neighbors, brothers and sisters. People they loved. And many churches just couldn't go there. They ignored the gay relationships in the Bible or tried to make them seem heterosexual. By the way, I would like to note that there is nothing anywhere in the Bible against lesbianism. Anyway, all of that worked against religion in America. Now, I think we might be running a little long, and I'm supposed to have a pause here, but since I think you want to get home for lunch, I'm going to keep on going. What about us? I'm talking about the overall movement of Unitarian Universalists. Actually, we're doing quite well. Since the year 2000, we have only lost 5 congregations. We're in pretty good shape. We've had relatively few sex scandals. I've not heard of a single case of pedophilia with a minister, and if that happens somewhere, The congregation involved would be shouting all over the place about it, and that minister would end up in jail. We don't protect them. Now, there are other types of sexual misbehavior, and we as a movement have been guilty of that. It was not until the year 2013 that it became an ethical violation of the UUMA for a minister to date within the congregation. I have a huge problem that it took that long. I remember back in the 1980s when I was in seminary arguing that it was like a therapist dating their client and it was really bad for the rest of the congregation. Sorry, that's one of my hobby horses. COVID did not do a lot of damage to our movement. Zoom works for us, especially because now our homebound and disabled members can participate. We were not negatively affected by the internet, especially since we don't insist on theological conformity. In fact, it's helped us because more people have found us. Our ministers are not usually the wealthiest people in the congregation, and we don't ask you to tithe. More on that next month. Traditionally, we've been highly welcoming of LGBTQ folks, and some of our ministers are gay or transgender. That doesn't seem to be a problem. But the politics. We do fall down there. We are overwhelmingly liberal, and we make no bones about it. It used to be that one could be a Republican and a UU. Now, not so much. And I have a problem with that. I worry that we drive people away because we don't like the way they vote. And I don't know what the answer is. Well, what about this congregation here in South Bend? How are we doing? Well, I think we're doing great. In 2000, we had 110 members. We currently, I think the number is 116. Our recent high point was 2020, when we ballooned up to 123. But then COVID hit and our minister left, both of which did cost us. But all things considered, I think we're doing pretty well membership-wise. And I love the quality of people, the new folks that are joining us. Amen. Since COVID, we have embraced Zoom, and we're getting rather good at it. We seem to be doing a lot of other things right. I love that we have a D&D group, that we do jammies and cereal. Game nights are popular, and all sorts of interesting activities that give us a chance to just plain enjoy being together. I love our concerts. The lay-led services and the music on them, outstanding. We have adult forum on Sunday mornings, and Barbara Williams runs the Great Discussions Group, and we're known in the community as a welcoming congregation. That's really something to be proud of. But there are some areas that I personally think we need to do some work. And at the talk back after the service, you can add your 2 cents one way or the other. Politically, we're falling down. We are not welcoming to folks who voted differently than most of us did. We tend to think that everyone should think alike politically. I don't see how that is any different from thinking we should all believe the same things. I don't think that aligns with our stated values. And I know that's problematic. I don't have any easy answers. And I don't mean that we have to accept any ideas, political or theological, that put down other people, that deny them their rights legally, morally, and socially. Not all ideas are worthy, but the people are. On a less dramatic note, I'd like to see us have more adult RE, like building your own theology or drop-in Bible classes exploring ideas of Bart Ehrman and Elaine Pagels. I'd like to see us offering our whole life regularly. I'd love us to be known in the community as a safe place for children to learn healthy attitudes towards sex. And lastly, and perhaps most importantly, I would like to see us be even more active in community outreach and social justice issues. Maybe we could pick a couple of things that we care about in our local community and really have fun with it. Now, we do support the Broadway Church, the Crop Walk, and we're known in the local LBT community, but I would like to see us do more. What about our future? Will this place be here for those who need it down the road? Well, first I have to make a statement, and not all of you may be happy with it, but hear me out. I am not interested in being a perpetual growth machine for our existence. I am only interested in continuing if we stand for something, if we have meaning, because we are meeting needs. Which does bring us to the question, what do we have to offer? Community. We're really good with that. And community will always be needed. In fact, I think in the future it will be needed even more. And a church family is a wonderful thing. Here in this church, there are so many stories of people just helping one another, of being there for each other. But there's something more. And forgive me, but I don't know how else to say this. I do not know of any other group, institution, or movement which has as a primary focus, which insists as a principle of existence, that we can all get along together, appreciate each other, care about each other, despite our differences, theologically, sexually, and politically. That idea is vital to our well-being as a species. I firmly believe that is what we stand for. And that alone is worth keeping this place alive and growing. So be it. And I would advise you to get comfortable because my final words are long. Unitarian Universalism has been around now since the 1960s, based on our earlier incarnations as Unitarians and Universalists. People don't understand the incredible influence that we have. There was excuse me, the word has just gone out of my head. There's a report in Canada of religion, and they discovered people checking the box of what they believed religiously or what church they attended. And Unitarian Universalism was checked 10 times more than anyone ever saw in the pews. There's a lot of people who identify with us that are not necessarily here with us in community. Our principles are out there in a lot of different forms. Personally, I love congregations, and I think we offer a lot. But even without that, the principles are strong and important. We happen to have a church of the larger fellowship, which is now the church online. And yes, they do have services, but even more important, they do a huge amount of social justice work. And one of their most important parts is the Worthy Now program, which reaches into prisons, sometimes as pen pals. I have done prison ministry, both in person and as a pen pal. And if there is ever a place where people were needed to be told that they still have dignity and worth, that is the place. And we reach out to them. This year, they put out a newsletter about their Worthy Now program. And this is an excerpt from their end of the year newsletter. The following is about a prison in Iowa. In the Newton Correctional Facility, there exists a group of some 28 Unitarian Universalists who have formed their own congregation. They call it the Newton UU Fellowship because they don't want the name of their group to reference incarnation. And they meet regularly. They are supported by a local congregation and a student minister. These beloveds are thriving in their faith despite barrier after barrier being put in their way. Their leaders have been transferred to other facilities or put in solitary confinement. Their rituals are routinely questioned and often blocked by the prison. Despite all of this, the group's understanding of the life-giving power of Unitarian Universalist values keeps them going. Christopher King, their secretary, writes, "You might expect justice, equality, transformation, pluralism, interdependence, and generosity might be hard to find in this environment. What might surprise you, though, is the abundance of those qualities and the desire to embrace them that can be found here as well." Each week, this group recites a message of welcome in which they commit themselves to living our Unitarian Universalist values. And this is the message of welcome that they have written. We gather as one community with many beliefs, following many paths, all with unknown destinations. As one, we seek to be treated fairly. Justice is only possible with love for one another. The heart in your chest pulses with life, as does mine. Equity in our human nature is the design of nature. Each step we take on our journey allows us to explore who we are. Transformation stops only when we refuse to advance. As believers in a multitude of thought, we embrace the challenge of acceptance. Pluralism is celebrated through respect for individuality. Through recognition of the efforts of our actions, we govern our thoughts and deeds. Interdependence allows strength in numbers with caution about selfishness. In the spirit of unity, we vow to give as much as we receive. Generosity is measured in thought, attention, gift, and assistance. Every soul who seeks our community will be given the opportunity to become the masterpiece that nature intended. End quote. We are needed. Our movement is needed. So let us live our values, each according to our understanding, and let us love one another. So be it. We will now extinguish the